Hello everyone, welcome to the fresh video cast episode of My Emotions Matter. And today we have a very special team member with us, Aprajita Jha. So for my ease, I'll call her AJD as I usually call her in the office environment. So I'll use the short form. So AJD is the linchpin of our organization, and I'm sure that many of you guys might be wondering as to what is a linchpin. So a linchpin is a person who is vital to the organization, who is very important to the organization, and we feel that Aprajita Jha is extremely important to us. Her presence in our organization is extremely important. She takes care of the operations aspect in our organization, and we are so grateful that she agreed to become a part of this interview. Welcome to the episode, and thank you for being my interviewee, AJB.
Hi, Mahima. Thank you so much for calling me over for this podcast. I'm really excited to have the conversation with you.
So today we'll be talking about discomfort. Like usually we talk about comfort and how can we be more comfortable, but today we'll be talking about how can we deal with discomfort in a way that is emotionally intelligent, and we'll be sharing our own personal experiences. So all the answers that we'll be sharing today will be from our own personal experiences. So I'd like you guys to keep that in mind, because all of us are different and all of us might have different ways to deal with different things. So yeah, uh, one sense of discomfort that I am going through in these present days is that I can see that the lockdown might be eased in the near future. I'm not saying that
Yeah.
lockdown should not be eased out. The only thought that I'm having right now is that I'm very hopeful that the economic activities will rise, will begin, the country will become economically strong. But in my personal case, looking at it from a micro level, I am likely to experience a slight level of discomfort because my routine is going to change. Earlier I had a certain time to wake up, I had a certain time to go to sleep, I had a certain time to do my skincare, and now if the lockdown would be eased and as we would enter the new normal, there are likely to be a lot of changes in the environment. So that makes me feel uncomfortable, and I think change does that to people. So AJD, what are your experiences with change and the discomfort that is brought about by a change?
I can certainly relate to what you just shared because, yeah, I mean, when the pandemic outbreak happened, we were not even prepared for the phase that we have been living in for the past 2, 3 months. And now, even though we might not want to admit it completely, people have been calling it the new normal, and we have somehow been accustomed to living this way because it's kind of easier in a sense to be like, just in the same space. You can also rest and do your work all together, and like you said, there's a certain regimen that you have for yourself as well, to take care of yourself and have that me time for yourself. So I can definitely relate to whatever you said. And even I have that sense of discomfort when I think about how I will how I will adapt to the post lockdown phase. And even I have questions and certain doubts about my adapting style after all this will get over. But I think the first thing that helps me, especially when it comes to uncomfortable changes or changes in general, is like to be able to accept that it's happening and it's happening for a reason. I know sometimes people might say that what good might be behind the pandemic that happened, but so many positive things also happened. Just because people were socially isolated, it does not mean that everything was negative. We could see that how the environment was a lot more better, how animals got their habitat, in a sense that there were not a lot of people like moving around, so even animals got a lot of their time to move around and have their space. So a lot of positive things also happened when this pandemic outbreak took place, and it's also taking place even until now. So I think acceptance is the biggest key, I would say. It's whenever we are trying to deal with any kind of change, because when it's not there in the first place, it's likely to cause us a lot of uncomfortable emotions, and it's going to make things difficult for us, because if we don't accept the situation in the first place, we will not move towards addressing how we can change it for ourselves, or how we can control it up to a certain extent. Like acceptance really helps like ease things out, even if it's difficult sometimes to obviously accept the situation whenever things don't go the way we want to, but at least understanding that things have happened a certain way, and being able to reflect upon that and see how the situation can help us grow, or how we can learn certain things out of it, may make the process of change easier. And I think in many instances this is the way I've seen the process of change in the recent years, and it has quite helped me. Before, it used to be a lot more difficult for me to deal with change, but I think in the recent years I've learned a little more easily to deal with I think changes. And I think after acceptance, like reflection really matters. Reflection matters, and reflection Gorda Kiripani, I think we might want to see what sort of choices we have whenever a certain change takes place. And I think for this, I really like this model called CIA, that is control, influence, and accept. So this was a model developed by Neil Thompson, who is a human relations specialist, and Sue Thompson, who's a social worker. So they've made this very interesting model around which we can work on ourselves and in our relationships. So what they say is, in any situation when you face certain kind of discomfort, or when you do not know how to deal with situations exactly, or when you're overwhelmed with a lot of choices, or you don't know what tomorrow holds for you, maybe using this model can help. So maybe CIA might say, C stands for control. So what in this situation can I absolutely control? So maybe hamro case ma, like we were talking about, things might change after the lockdown gets over, and we don't know how things will be. So maybe we might want to start thinking about what we can control in that situation. It can be our responses, or maybe we can do certain things to keep ourselves calm even when things might not go the way we want to. And I think I was influenced. So influence maje, although we might not be able to control certain things completely, there may be certain things that we can influence to a certain extent. So maybe if we might want to seek certain comfort when we go back to working in physical space, maybe communicating with our colleagues regarding something that may make us feel safe and comfortable when we might not feel so, so that they can help us in such moments. That can be one way. And again, another would be accept last month. So maybe there might be certain things that you have to accept and you can do nothing about it. So what might be such factors? So maybe if we start reflecting upon these things even now, and prepare ourselves for what will happen after the post lockdown phase, maybe the process of change will be a little bit easier. Although I'm saying all these things and I'm also preparing myself bit by bit, I know it's going to be a difficult process, but like they say, it's nothing comes easy. So I think change is also not a very easy process, but I think change is what helps us learn and evolve as a person. So these might be some, like helpful things to think about and move ahead of this experience.
I think there are two major key takeaways that I take from your answer. The first one being that it is very important to accept whatever is happening. Acceptance makes it easy. And when accepting, when we have to accept a difficult thing altogether, or when we have to accept a fact that which seems to be very negative, it can be very difficult for us. So maybe we can also look at the positive side of things and then accept whatever it is as it is. So, we could look at the positive side. Like, in case when the lockdown began, we could look at the positive side, like, okay, now the pollution is being reduced, animals have more freedom. So, by looking at the positive side of it, we could accept the change that had come into our life. And now that the lockdown will be eased, and now if we enter the new normal, so at that point of time, also, accepting the positivity of this situation. might help us. And the second takeaway that I have from your answer is the control, influence, and accept model, where you realize like what is in your control. So you only focus on things that are in your control. You try to influence by taking positive actions, and then you accept the situations as they are. You do not resist them, but then you embrace them by accepting them. So I think that's a beautiful way to look at things. And as we already talked about, like how reframing things in a positive way can really help. In my case, I think a year back, I was also a person who really followed positivity. But what was a habit that I did not really like about myself has to be toxic positivity. So, I always wanted to feel positive. I was never willing to accept any negative emotions. And for instance, if I felt angry, or if I felt sad, or if I felt distressed, I usually used to judge myself for feeling that way. And thanks to the books that I've come across in the last year and the quotes that I've come across in the last year, I've finally come to realize that it is not possible for a person to feel positive all the time. And it is okay for one to also experience difficult emotions. So, what are your thoughts on this? And have you also experienced a situation where you always wanted to feel positive all the time and you went onto the path of blind positivity? And what did you do to get out of such situation if you have had such experiences?
Yeah, I think, yeah, I've also been through whatever you just explained. It's kind of easy to actually compare your lives with others, especially when there's so much of positivity hype going around in the social media. And I think I've, like, really fell for it 2, 3 years ago, if I really have to say. I used to think that maybe my life isn't as good as the people that I look up to. Of course, not everybody's, like, posts and comments and whatever they shared affected me, but there were certain people who I really looked up to, and whenever they used to post certain things, I used to always wonder, like, how do they remain so positive and energetic and optimistic all the time? And whenever I used to reflect back on my own difficult experiences and situations, I used to feel like maybe I'm a little unprivileged, or maybe I don't have a life as good as them. But uh, I think it took me a long while to realize that I had actually, like, I had this thought process that nothing will go wrong, like, even in uh, I think nothing should go wrong with me when others are having a rather good life, or this shouldn't happen to me, or why me, Bonne? Like, perceptions were a lot into my thought processes. It was kind of ingrained into my way of being back then, and I think that's what I also, like, transferred into my relationships. Whenever, like, I used to see happy people around me, and I used to see friendships, like, so nicely managed. I used to see relationships so nicely managed. I used to look at my own life relationships, and I used to think maybe there's this things are not going wrong, and I should not be deserving this. But then I realized, how much of what people like, live, or how much of what people show me is actually the entirety of their reality. It's definitely not. It's just a glimpse of what they have to show it to the world or share with them. If it, of course, does not mean that they don't have problems in their life. It's just that we don't know about it very closely. So that's when, and I think when I started, like, operating with that thought a lot, like when I started thinking that this is not what I should be like deserving, or this is not what should happen to me, a lot of hurt and resentment and um, a lot of despair kind of bottled in me, and it was not very good to face at the end of the day. And it was very, I think, it was very slowly that I came to realize that just because you want to have a positive outlook towards life, it does not mean that you have to ignore all the negative experiences altogether, because they also teach you something at the end of the day, and they also make you a certain person. Because I think, if I have to reflect back on my own life experiences, as much as I have learned out of um, positive experiences or my achievements, I think I've learned more out of my failures more out of whatever uncomfortable experiences I've had, because I think they had certain things to teach me. They had certain things to tell me that maybe this is not the way I should have operated, or this is what should I have learned out of those experiences. So even if you wish to have a positive outlook towards life, we need to be able to also address whatever negative experiences that we have, to know what kind of people we are, I guess, because that also tells a lot about us, about how we can deal with negativities, about how we can deal with problems, how we can deal with adverse situations. So I think it helps you know a lot about yourself if you take it that way. Of course, it's not very easy. When we face negativities, it's very difficult to deal with it. But having said that, just because it's difficult, shunning it altogether makes things worse, I think, in the long run. So yeah, I think that's what I have to share in that case.
I think again, there are two very important learnings that I take from your answer. The first thing that you stated reminded me of something that Sagar Dai states. So, Sagar Dai is the co founder of My Emotions Matter, and when working together, he often tells us that when we look at Instagram stories of other people, and then when we, try to judge other people's life just by looking at their Instagram stories, we are actually judging their lives by looking at 1 minute of their 24 hours. So that is
Right,
something that
absolutely.
I was reminded of when you were sharing your answer, and I think that's so true. Sometimes, even I personally feel that sometimes on our social media we can see that positivity hype, where people want to feel positive all the time, or people might be feeling positive all the time. But what we need to
Right.
understand is that it could be that people do not like sharing their negative experiences out there in the social media, as a result of which the difficult emotions that they might be going through might not be visible in social media. But it is very important to understand that everyone has problems. Everyone has
Exactly.
experienced difficult emotions, and everyone has experienced challenges in their life. The reason why we become who we are is because of our difficult experiences. And I think the second important learning that I have from your answer is that sometimes when we go through negative experiences, we like to shut down those negative experiences, and that is something that even I have done. So when I was in my high school, I was going through a difficult time. Because of some personal reasons, I was going through some really difficult time in my high school years. And when I joined my university, and when talking to friends, I think I usually used to tell them that I do not want to talk about my high school, or I do not want to talk about those years, because I just feel like those years never existed in my life. But slowly I'm coming to realize how wrong I was in making such statements, because my negative experiences have also taught me and have helped me become who I am today. So rather than ignoring all the negativity and all the difficult experiences that have come across in your life, it's very important to accept them, and accept them as a medium of growth for oneself. So
Right.
when talking about difficult experiences, as I already stated that I am a person who didn't like in my past, I did not like feeling negative, or I did not like talking about my uncomfortable experiences. So I think in my case, I think when it comes to negative emotions, I also tend to resort to unhealthy coping mechanisms. And that is something that I've also come across in various social media posts about how sometimes when people feel negative, or when people feel angry, sad, frustrated, all of these emotions, they can resort to very, very unhealthy coping mechanisms. So, one thing that I do in my case is that, whenever I'm angry, or whenever I'm jealous, or whenever I'm infuriated, I usually start using my social media. I'll start scrolling through my social media mindlessly. But after I put my phone away, I still know that I'm still very angry, I'm still feeling frustrated, and those feelings have not gone away. So it's a very unhealthy coping mechanism, because I'm not dealing with my emotions, but I'm trying to avoid them. So what are your experiences
Right.
with unhealthy coping mechanisms, and what are some steps that you take to ensure that you're not falling into the trap of these unhealthy coping mechanisms?
Yeah, as you were like telling about your situation, I was already picturing myself in your place, because I do that too. I think a lot of times when I'm angry or like certain things have not gone the way I expected, or when I'm disappointed, I usually either resort to social media, or I just try to read some sort of articles for perspective, or I resort to watching videos. But although yeah, they're helpful sometimes, but of course they're not the only. I think they would not solve the problems that we had in the first place. So I think yeah, a lot of times I do that. And something that I've noticed is although I start like redirecting myself towards something else, the bodily sensations that I have as a result of what I felt earlier, it kind of stays even when I'm like trying to occupy myself with certain activities or distractions. So I think over the time I've realized that the bodily sensations kind of signal that there's something that we need to tend to, and there's certain things that are unaddressed that we might want to go back to and resolve. So I think even though sometimes those like distractions might help us, most of the times they may not, because we are leaving certain things unattended, especially those that we know might bottle up and might show up unexpectedly in an instance that we might not expect in the future. So I think for me, over the time, bodily sensations have been a great way to be aware that okay, I'm still feeling uncomfortable, and I need to go back and resolve whatever made me feel uncomfortable in the first place. And I think this is the reason why I consider awareness as one of the major strategies for management. And this is also what we express in our sessions as well. This is what we try to communicate. And I think once when I've realized that okay, I need to go back and deal with those emotions, questioning myself and reflecting has always helped. So whenever I'm feeling certain kind of uncomfortable emotions, I try to question myself what exactly is troubling me. Is it the a situation itself, or the interpretation of that situations that I've created in my mind? So I try to separate the fact from the feeling, because I've noticed that a lot of times it's not just the event that has hurt us or made us angry or has stressed us out. It's also most of the times the way we interpret that event or the situation. So I try to separate my feelings and evaluations and judgments from the fact. And once I've arrived at that, it's kind of easier for me to tell the kind of emotions that I actually felt in response to that, and what sort of needs or values of mine might not have been fulfilled, as a result of which I might have felt those uncomfortable emotions or thought processes. So once I reach once I dig deep into my feelings and my needs, then that's when I realize that okay, this is what had happened to me, and maybe I can do certain things to now make myself feel more comfortable or more more at ease. So I think for me, what has worked almost all the time is paying attention to my bodily sensations. And I've realized that the moment I do that, the kind of first judgments that I have of those uncomfortable thoughts and emotions, which are rather gripping, they kind of um, loosen their hold and their grip on me. So I've realized that to be able to pay attention to that, like whatever sort of sensations that we are feeling in response to the uncomfortable emotions, and then trying to dig deep into what sort of keeping aside our judgments and evaluations, what did we feel as a result, and what needs of ours or values of ours were not fulfilled, as a result of which we felt those uncomfortable situations. So I think this is what works for me. There can be different ways in which it might work for somebody else, but I think yeah, I think reflection for me has really helped me deal with negative emotions over time, rather than just ignoring them or just shunning them off altogether.
I think there are three important learnings that I have from your answer. First, separating facts from feelings. So I think there's a whole video that we at My Emotions Matter have made on separating facts from feelings.
Right.
I'll make sure to link that video in the description box below so you guys can go and check it out. So I think it's very, very true. Sometimes it's not the event itself that has hurt us, but our interpretation of the event. So it can be very important to know what is troubling us and whether it is our feeling that is troubling us or whether it is that event. The second
Yeah.
very nice learning that I take from your answer is noticing your body sensations. I do not exactly remember the source where I read this quote, but I think I read it in my social media feed where people talked about if you want to notice how you feel, just notice how you breathe. And I think that is so important. Like when you can
Right.
notice your
Right.
bodily sensations, you'll realize like what kind of emotions am I feeling right now, and just being aware that you are experiencing a certain level or a certain set of emotions can really help you. And as you already stated, the third important learning that I have from your answer is that it is very important to deal with that emotion then and there, because otherwise that emotion could accumulate and come out in a situation where you least expected it to. So in my case
Right.
also, I think that happens. Like sometimes, the event might be so small, so insignificant, but yet my reactions to that event are very, very horrendously huge. They are very, very horrendously huge. And the reason why that
Yeah.
happens is that my past healing has not occurred and my past experiences have accumulated and bottled up. And when I cannot take anymore, it just comes out altogether. So bottling up
Yeah. Yeah.
emotions might not be good, but rather sitting with the emotions and dealing with them, confronting them, can be really helpful. So as we talk about like sitting with an emotion, what are your experiences when sitting with a difficult emotion, and what do you do specifically to sit with a difficult emotion? Because many of our audience might be confused as to what does sitting with an uncomfortable emotion mean, or what does accepting an uncomfortable emotion mean. So what does that mean to you, AJB?
I think for me, a major thought process that drives me into sitting with a difficult emotion is seeing emotions as data and not just as a natural occurrences of our being. Like I've been trying to tell myself for some time now. So I think this perception really helps you look at emotions as signals of your met or unmet needs or your values. So I think the moment you realize this, you kind of tend to view emotions as more important data about yourself that tell you that, okay, you're feeling positive emotions because certain needs and values of yours have been fulfilled or have been met, and you're feeling certain negative emotions because certain needs and values of yours might not have been met. So trying to view emotions in that light might help us become more comfortable with actually sitting with negative emotions as well. I know it's not difficult in the first hand, it's not difficult for me, not nor it is easier for anybody in our team as well, but I think exercising it again and again is what gets us closer to understanding ourselves even through the negative emotions. So I think sitting with my emotions, whether it's positive or negative, might be the first thing in that aspect might be to look at my emotions as data and to knowing myself better. And second would be to take emotions as important um, important drivers of whatever choices you make, because sometimes like I said, emotions are useful data that can help us know about ourselves, but it can also help us make choices accordingly when we know what values and needs of ours have not been met, so that we can make choices accordingly and help ourselves come out of certain uncomfortable situations that we may be facing. So it's also important data to be knowing about ourselves, and it can be important data to drive our decision making as well, so that we can, if we are feeling overwhelmed by a certain emotion or overcharged by certain emotions, we know that what choices we have in front of ourselves, and then we pick a choice that might work best for us. Of course, we don't know it beforehand that what might work or what might not, but at least we can have a clear evaluation of, okay, I have these many choices, and I think if I pick this one, it can, help myself come out of this situation, and it can make me feel more comfortable and at ease. So I think that is what I would consider, like, sitting with an uncomfortable emotion, or for that matter, a comfortable one as well. And I think the more we start looking at it this way, uh, the more it feels actually, the more you'll be very, um, informed about yourself, because it's a kind of very self-illuminating process that I find as well. And I think whenever I've done this, it's been easier to deal with uncomfortable experiences as well.
I think one very important learning that I take from your answer is that rather than judging ourselves for feeling certain emotions, we could ask ourselves the simple question of what of my needs or values have been met if it is a positive emotion that I'm experiencing. And if it's a difficult emotion that I'm experiencing, then maybe we could ask ourselves, like, what of my value or needs have not been met? So sometimes, we end up judging ourselves for feeling angry, or for feeling frustrated, or for feeling jealous, or feeling inferior. And that is what makes it very difficult for us to sit with that negative emotion, because we are trying to resist that emotion rather than accept that emotion. But I think one very important learning that I have from your answer is that accepting our emotions is accepting the humanity within us, because all of us as humans are, bound to experience certain emotions, positive ones as well as difficult ones. And it is only human to also experience negative emotions. So it is very important to catch yourself when you're judging yourself when you experience a negative emotion. And I think
Right.
uh, you've written a very beautiful blog called Dealing with Discomfort. I'll make sure that I'll also link that blog in the description box below, so that all of my audience can check that article out. AGV has written it beautifully. So before we wrap up the conversation, what is one important key takeaway that the process of writing that article has given you, that you'd like to share with our audience?
I think one major takeaway would be, uh, I've mentioned it somewhere in the article as well, I think, as far as I remember. Um, I've I'd mentioned that it's not the uncomfortable, thought processes or emotions in themselves that make our lives inconvenient, but it's actually not knowing how to deal with them that makes our lives inconvenient. So I think that was one of the major takeaway for me, and I think that is what I wanted to communicate through my article. And it's just a matter of finding what works for us. Of course, it's not easy to deal with, uncomfortable changes or uncomfortable thought processes and emotions that we go through, but I think the more we know what can help us navigate through those uncomfortable changes, well, the more we can, be prepared and resilient for the next time something similar happens. So for me, I think one of the a few things that have really helped me navigate, negative emotions or negative thought processes, I think first would be journaling. And journaling has really helped me actually construct my thoughts properly whenever I've, judged myself for feeling a certain way, or whenever I've judged someone else in an, in a very awkward situation or in a situation of conflict. And I think another thing that has really helped me is having conversations. Right now also, I think in this podcast, I could relate to you in so many instances, I think. And that's the beauty of conversations, as much as you learn so much about the from the perspectives of other people, you can also, go back with the feeling that I'm not the only one. I'm just, a variant of similar stories that go around in the world. And I think once we realize that, we can deal with our situation more positively, even when we're feeling uncomfortable, I guess. Because a lot of times we go on to feel that we may be the only ones, at the receiving end of such injustice, and such ruthlessness that life projects on us, but that's often not the reality. If we look around us, there's so much happening around us in the lives of people, and although we just have that positivity bias sometimes and see that other people's lives are better than us, there's also so many problems and troubles that they go through that they might not share with us. But the moment we have conversations with them, we realize that there's so much that we have among each other that connects us as human beings. And I think sometimes just sitting and letting that feeling sink in, and also meditating has helped me a lot as an individual. And might sound funny on the outlook, but sometimes just laughing the situations off has also helped me, because like I said, sometimes we make a situation to be more bigger than it actually is in reality. And when I actually separate out that thing, that okay, this was a fact and I was making a mountain out of it, and I just laugh it off, and it makes me feel so relieved that I might have went on to feel that emotion in an even intense way, and I might have reacted in an uncalled for manner. But thankfully, when I realized that okay, the situation was in fact very simple, or uh, or the thing that caused me discomfort was very simple, that's when I actually realized that okay, this is something that was impermanent and it's not going to affect me for a long time, so why just let it keep hampering you. So these are the few things that I've learned from my own experiences, and something that I've even shared in the article. So yeah, it's not knowing how to deal with it's not it's not the uncomfortable emotions or thought process that makes our life inconvenient. It's actually not knowing how to deal with them that does. And this was my major key takeaway. And something that a quote that really helps me redirect myself in uncomfortable situations is a quote by Susan David, who is the author of Emotional Agility. And I always find it so beautiful. She says, discomfort is the price we pay for admission to a meaningful life. And I think from the time I've learned about this quote, it has almost always given me hope when I've not felt very positive and very optimistic in any situation. And I think this redirects me into thinking, even when I'm feeling certain uncomfortable situations or uncomfortable thought processes and emotions, what is it teaching me, and what am I learning out of this, and what is it growing me into? How is this likely to make me as an individual? And I think these are certain things that once we start thinking about, we can even make situations better when we face something uncomfortable.
I think, as you already talked about, how conversations can be very, very important, and managing our emotions in a productive way, because is very important, because sometimes it's not the difficult emotions that affect us, but sometimes it's just not doing in our part about how to deal with that emotion that really bogs us down. So at My Emotions Matter, we have this package where we help people deal with their emotions in a productive way. If you would like to know more about that service in particular, please reach out to us via our social media, or you can also feel free to reach out to us via our email. There are also other services on emotional intelligence that we provide, so please reach out to us via our social media. And as AJD stated, that discomfort is the key to a meaningful life. So we all experience discomfort at various events in life, and things work differently for all of us. So it's very important to reflect, to sit and reflect, and find what works the best for us, so that we can find a way out to bring ourselves out of that discomfortable situation. So for all my audience out there, please also try to reflect and find ways out into which you could bring yourself out of an uncomfortable situation. And until then, please stay safe, please stay protected, and I wish you a very emotionally resilient week ahead. Thank you guys. Bye bye.